danger of losing all the gains of 30 years, of losing the very basic principles upon which a program was being built, of losing the principle of parity and the principle of government responsibility. And this, if you'll forgive me for saying so, is more important than losing a few dollars of income in 1955 or 1956. And I say that with careful consideration. I know it's tough, what's happened to your prices and your income. And I'm not saying that this is anything short of tragic, but I am saying that the ultimate tragedy is the perversion, the denial, the repudiation of the principle of parity and the principle of government responsibility. And the time has come. The time has come for a new Amos, and Farmers Union is seeking to provide that Amos. You remember about Amos, the Old Testament. He was a cattleman who lived on the hills of Tekoa, and he already in those days, the 8 centuries before Christ, the city was prospering and the country was languishing, and he went to town one Saturday afternoon. He looked around at the wealth and luxury of the Oriental court of his day, and he looked at the extravagance of the city, and he compared it with the poverty of his own people, and it made him so mad he went down and joined the Farmers Union. And on Sunday morning he got out on the street corner and began to preach. You can read in the Bible there what he said. He said, "In the name of God, I'm sick and tired of your feasts and your festivals, your solemn ceremonies and your sacrifices, your burnt offerings and your pious pretensions." He got pretty eloquent when he got to talking about the burnt offerings. He said, "They are an abomination in the nostrils of the Lord," which I'm sure you understand is merely a polite preacher's way of saying it stinks. And he wound up this sermon of his by crying, "In the name of God, let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream." That was Amos, 8 centuries before Christ. The Farmers Union in 1956, in the same spirit and with the same purpose, cries, "Let parity roll down as waters and 100% of parity as a mighty stream." And this is our slogan and this is our goal. Now there's some other things I wanted to say about the place of youth in a future economy of abundance and the building of that economy so that they can enter in, but more time is gone than I was allotted on the program, and I'm not going to be able to say them. But I do want to touch very briefly on one other point that I had in mind. I have said that if we are going to enter into the economy of abundance, abundance must be produced and abundance must be distributed. And I want to say now, if we're going to enter into the economy of abundance in our time or in any foreseeable future, peace must be maintained. War is the ultimate enemy of abundance. If we have war, we shall have neither an economy of abundance for our youth to enter into, nor any youth to enter into any kind of a future or an economy. War is the ultimate denial of all that we stand for and all that we work for. It must be avoided, but more than that, peace must be established. And these are two different things. Simply to prevent war, to keep out of war, to totter and balance on the brink of war is not enough for an economy of abundance. If we're going to maintain the armed hostility, the armed neutrality, the arms race of the recent past years, we'll have little of abundance to enjoy, for all our resources will be squandered and put into stockpiles, surpluses, which nobody complains about, surpluses of military supplies, surpluses which incidentally obsolete at the rate of 33% a year. You can't have abundance and have that kind of an economy. And the answer is the maintenance, the establishment, the extension, the maintenance of a genuine peace. And this is a positive thing. This is something more than simply the prevention of war. or the forestalling or the pushing back of the specter of war. The creation of a positive peace is something very different and calls for a very different technique. I'm not an expert on military strategy. I'm frankly not very much in sympathy with the military approach to the whole problem, but I am convinced of this, that the most, and this, well, farmers, I don't necessarily go along with all the things you adopted here yesterday about defense and security. I'm sure we are at one and in harmony on this point, and that is that the best that military defense can do is merely to buy us time. It does not create peace. The most that it can do, if it can even do this, is to forestall disaster and give us a breathing space within which we can work for the positive instruments of peace. And these have to do with the sharing of our abundance and the sharing of our techniques. A group of 94 leading American religious leaders, Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish, recently published a statement on the subject of American abundance and world need. And in this statement they used this phrase: it is essential, they said, that we must share material abundance, technical skills, and the dynamic spirit of a free society. This is both the short range and the long range. We must find the ways of meeting immediate human need with a portion of our abundance, but far more important, we must share our technical skills with vastly expanded programs of technical assistance and technical aid and economic aid and development. We must find the ways of meeting the legitimate revolutionary demands of the underprivileged, exploited, and underdeveloped peoples of the world. I'm not talking now about the communist revolution or the communist infiltration. These things take place because people have legitimate grievances. And the communist philosophy and the communist ideology feeds upon these legitimate and revolutionary grievances and needs and demands of hungry people, of poor people, of sick people, of ignorant people in many parts of the world. And our first order of business must be to find the ways of lifting the level of life for these people. Gunnar Myrdal, great Swedish sociologist, has recently published a book, a very thoughtful analysis of the international economy, in which he raises this very interesting and significant question. He says it is obvious by now that the thesis of Karl Marx about the class conflict is wrong so far as the internal domestic economies of the developed countries of the world is concerned. Karl Marx taught, that the wealthy would grow richer and the poor would grow poorer, and the gulf between the two would grow constantly wider until at last the people at the bottom, being vastly larger in the majority, would rebel and revolt and sweep away the capitalist society and sweep in the communist society. This has not happened in America. It shows no sign of happening in America. In the developed countries of Western Europe and of North America and of Australia, this has not happened. And although there are still serious inequities and still serious gaps between the rich and the poor, these gaps have been gradually growing less in many instances. And it appears that Karl Marx was dead wrong in his insistence upon the inevitability of the class conflict within the economies of nations. But the question Gunnar Myrdal raises, a very significant one, is, may it turn out now that the Marxian thesis, which was proved so wrong in the domestic economies of the world, may turn out to be right in the international relations of the world. Because the fact of the matter is, according to the studies of the FAO and the ILO and other United Nations organizations, the fact of the matter is that the rate of development in the well-developed countries is moving more rapidly than the rate of development in the underdeveloped countries, and the gap is growing constantly wider between the wealth and welfare and the well-being of the highly developed countries such as our own, the gap between that and that of the underdeveloped countries. This we must consider very seriously. If we want to build a world of peace, a world in which these young people before us can in fact enter into an economy of abundance. I should like to suggest that it is high time for us to recapture the vision of an ancient prophet and to find the ways of implementing it as it has never been implemented in the history of the world. You remember the words of Micah the prophet, who said that in the coming day they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. I give this to you reverently in paraphrase for our time. They shall beat their bombers into cargo ships, and their atom bombs into the producers of energy for human service. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But they shall sit every man on his own family farm, under his own vine and fig tree, in his own small business, in his own union-protected job, and none shall make them afraid. Let me conclude these remarks by quoting the concluding words from the book of the year, the junior study book for 1957. It is contrary to the will of God that islands of plenty should persist among oceans of poverty, hunger, and distress. Bread for myself is a material concern. Bread for my brother is a spiritual concern. In his last message written on the morning of the day he died, Franklin D. Roosevelt wrote, "Today we are faced by the preeminent fact that if civilization is to survive, we must cultivate the science of human relationships, the ability of all peoples of all kinds to live together and work together in the same world in peace. We seek peace, enduring peace, more than an end to war, an end to the beginnings of all war. We must conquer the doubts, the fears, the ignorance, and the greed that make this horror possible." In the name of our young people, let us dedicate ourselves and our organization to the production of abundance, to the distribution of abundance, to the maintenance of a dynamic peace.
Thank you very much, Shirley Green, for your very informative and your hard-hitting talk to us tonight.